Hello, my lovelies. It's Janet Perez with the Painted Saguaro, and I am working today with a couple of different new products. I am using the Paint Couture Embossing Medium, and this is great for raised stencils, but it's also fabulous for adding texture to pieces. And what I'm doing here, I'm going to point you to it, not me. I am going to paint this lamp that I picked up for $5 at a local auction and give it a new look and a new life, because you know that Tuscan Italian look is kind of over at this point. So I'm just dipping a chippy brush into this embossing medium and I'm stippling it over this piece lightly. I just want to give the piece some teeth so that the paint has something to hold on to when I paint it. And I've already cleaned this piece. I cleaned it with some TSP, and then I finished it up with some 50-50 vinegar water, which is my standard cleaning process for pretty much every piece I do, unless it's really, really bad. And then I'll use some other cleaning products and agents in there too. But this is going on really nicely. As you can see, it's kind of a white color. And it is just giving it, like I said, just a little bit of texture so it's not so slick and shiny, and the paint will stick to it a little bit better, and it has more of an old world look versus a Tuscan look from the 1990s. And it's a super, super heavy lamp. This thing must weigh 30 pounds. And I'm using just a negligible amount of this embossing medium, just enough, like I said, to give it a light coat. And once this is on and dry, then we'll go on to the next step. Okay, so as you can see, the piece is completely coated with the Paint Couture embossing medium, and it's just got a light coat. I didn't want to completely inundate the piece with it. This is a resin piece, but I want it to look like natural material, whether that be concrete or wood or whatever. I mean, it kind of looked like wood before, but it was just too slick and too shiny and too new looking for my liking. So I aged it out a little bit. So I'm putting the lid back on the embossing medium really well. Another tip is I did the finial for this piece as well. And when I have a piece that is like a screw-on piece or something, whether it be a finial or a knob or something, I'll stick it on the end of a paintbrush that it fits onto so that I can paint it. So I'm not touching it, and it works really well. So I've just got this sitting on a paintbrush until it dries, and I've set it down on its side, hanging over the ledge so that it doesn't touch anything, and we're good to go. So I will be right back with my paint colors. All right, so we've had a chance for this to dry, and it is pretty much dry to touch for the better part of all intents and purposes. So the colors I'm going to be using on this lamp are Espresso by Paint Couture, Carbon by Paint Couture, Truffle, which is, it's almost like a mushroom color. It's really cool, by Paint Couture. I guess truffle is a mushroom technically, right? And then Vintage Moss, which I have just a little bit of, but this is I'm going to be using for, it's a great green, by the way. Sort of a sagey green. And as we all know, sage is a big, big color in home decor these days. So I'm just going to open these up. And when I'm working with open jars of paint, I like to put the lid on top of the jar so the jar doesn't dry out, and use the paint out of the lid first. So these are my 3 earth tone colors that I'm going to be using, and I think it's going to be really pretty. So I'm going to start off with the darker color first, and I'm just going to stipple it on sporadically, but kind of heavy because this is my base coat, but I don't need 100% coverage with this technique. And again, I'm using a chippy brush and just going for it. I like the chippy brushes for textured pieces, and I do mostly texture. I love creating an old world look on pieces. So it's sort of my go-to brush. It's inexpensive. For smooth coat finishes and for top coat finishes, the Paint Couture, and I can't think of the item number it's called, but I'll drop a link in the comments. It is fabulous for smooth coat finishes and for blending. I love it. So I've already used all of that paint in the lid, so now I'm going straight into the jar, but I'm not overloading my brush. And that's the one negative about chippy brushes, is they tend to shed, especially when they're newer. I kind of like them better when they've been used and abused for several pieces, because then they don't shed nearly as much. But these were convenient, so I grabbed them. Let's get up here before I turn it. And I covered the cord, you guys, with a just a piece of tape, because I don't know if you've ever had an oops moment where you're painting a lamp or painting a desk with a lamp on it, or doing something and you get paint on the cord and then you can never get it off and it's just a mess, and every time you look at that cord you think, and I'm sure nobody else has ever done that except me, but I will confess that I did it many years ago and regretted it greatly afterwards. And I'm going to be doing a little distressing on this, not with sandpaper, because I personally don't care for sandpaper distressing. I think it looks too contrived. I like to naturally wear it down where, you know, somebody would grab it or, you know, move it or whatever. You imagine how a piece would be used or worn, just like if you're distressing a piece of furniture, you want to distress it at the edges where you would touch it as you're walking past it, or if you're sitting at a desk where your body would rub up against it, or where your hands grab it at the drawer pulls or whatever. To me, that is what distressing should be, but I know there's a lot of different opinions on that, and that's just my opinion. I'm not a furniture snob, I promise. However you distress, that's your business. This is just how I do it. So I like to wet distress back. And you have to do that while the paint is still quite fresh, but you know, this first layer, I'm not going to be distressing it back. And especially since I'm letting some of that texture medium peek through, because I kind of like that look with the light color underneath. I think it's kind of cool. What do you guys think? And if you haven't noticed, I haven't dipped my paint brush into the paint for quite some time, because I'm just kind of moving the paint that I already have on this piece around a little bit, using the paint that's still residual on my brush, and that's plenty. You don't want to overload paint on your piece. I mean, number one, paint is pretty expensive as it is, so you know, you don't want to waste it by putting so much on that it's just gonna be wiped off. So I can see where it's a little bit wetter, and I know that's where some paint is coagulated. And I can pick that up with my brush and move it into the spots that need it a little bit more. Let's see if I can turn this without... This is how I move furniture. One leg at a time sometimes when it's a really heavy piece. Okay. There we go, back into the paint and finish up this layer. I'm already loving this. And once we get the extra layers on and kind of do some distressing on this piece, it's going to be just amazing. Hopefully. Who knows? You never know how a piece is going to turn out until it's done. And then if you don't like it, then it's not done and you keep going until it is done, right? All right, get right in there just a little bit because I want that recess to be darker, not lighter. And that's it for the espresso, you guys. So we're gonna pop the lid back on that. And then we're gonna go to the next dark color. And that is going to be the carbon. And I'm just using the same brush because we're commingling. And I'm doing this more sporadically. So I'm not sure if you're seeing this, if it's showing up on camera or not, but it's a very subtle transition between the two colors, which is exactly what I want. I want it to look, like I said, like a natural piece of stone or a natural piece of wood or rock or whatever. I like taking nature inspired colors and creating art with them. Again, I'm gonna walk and roll it, rock and roll it. Just to get this side exposed a little bit. Put some of this gray over here. And I'm really not going to have to wet distress this, I don't think, because, at least not yet, because the paint is going on sporadically enough with this texture method that there's no place I need to distress quite yet. Walk and turn it one more turn to get to this side. And we're done with the carbon. This is going to be a really quick project, guys. I have a paintbrush right there. Paintbrush bristle, I should say. And you never want to grab a bristle with your fingers because you're just going to muck up your paint. Always put your paintbrush in and kind of push it against it, and that will pull it right out for you. Simple trick number 2. All right, now we're going to the truffle. And the truffle, like I said, is a beautiful kind of a mushroomy, taupey gray color, which it's probably one of my favorite colors so far that I've discovered with Paint Couture. And this is creating a little more contrast, so I really just kind of want to hit the high spots with this. I don't want to get it down in the recesses because I want to leave those dark colors down in the recesses. So actually I'm kind of, this is, that was nice, Bo, thank you. Hardly any paint on this brush at all, kids. Ooh. It almost ran away from me instead of walked away from me, huh? And when we add that moss green at the finish, I think that's going to be my final color on this. And I think that's what's going to make this really stand out as a beautiful, beautiful lamp. But I'm loving it so far. So in order to do the vintage moss color, I want to let this dry a little bit. It doesn't need to be fully dry, but I want it to at least tack up so I'm not blending colors per se. So let's just give it a few minutes and I'll be right back. Okay guys, so the piece is dry to the touch. It's obviously not cured or anything like that, but it is dry enough for me to go in and do my second to last step, well, third to last step, I think. We'll see. We'll see if this gives me the contrast that I want, or if I'm gonna do a second step before I do the final top coat. So this again is the vintage lace, or vintage lace. We got lace on the brain. Vintage moss, and I barely dipped my brush in. I'm wiping off the excess because I have such a little amount. I don't want to waste it. And I'm just barely going over the high points on this piece. Not even hardly touching it. But it brings out all that detail. Now if I get a little bit too much, a little overzealous, what I can do is I can blot it back a little bit. If it leaves a little bit too much texture to my liking, like you can see brush strokes on it, which I can in a couple spots, I'm gonna just spritz my paper towel and wipe it to wipe it back. And that's also gonna kind of wet distress it and get me back to some of those other layers. See, I don't know if you can see that, but there, right there you can see like the original wood tone. And that's perfect. I still have plenty of paint on here. And I'm just dragging it over the highlights. Again, I still got too much on this one. This one right in front of me likes me. Turn it. I have not dipped the brush again. This is called dry brushing, and that's because the paint is literally dry. I don't feel any moisture on my hand, but it's just laying down a little bit of this light color to draw out the accents. I want to get right in there and get some of that accent stuff going. There's a paintbrush right there, a paintbrush bristle. Now this one's dry, so I can pull that one off. I want to make sure I get all of the details highlighted. Now I'm starting to rub a little bit harder as my paintbrush dries, because I want to work that paint out of that brush onto the piece. It's the second time I've dipped my brush. That's it. This time I'm going to offload it a little bit. And I just want to kind of get up here along this edge. And quite honestly, guys, I think that's it. I think I'm happy with it. I've got the lightest color as the highlight. I've got the darkest color as the base coat over the texture medium, the embossing medium. I used 2 minuscule amounts of that vintage moss. And here you've got a lovely rejuvenated lamp that has a whole new life to it. And because you are dry brushing, the paint is not wet at all. That's it for the paint colors. After I get the top coat on it, which I am tempted to use wax because of all of the nooks and crannies in this piece, and I think that I will, because I don't want to have to deal with all the drips that would happen with all of the top coat soaking into the crevices of this piece. So I'm going to use a furniture wax, and then I'll come back and put the lampshade that I have on. I don't know how it will look on here anymore. And do a video of that, and then we're all done. So here I'm using the Amy Howard light wax puck, and it's an oil-based wax, so it's not something that you can go back over and paint more of later. You would have to remove it with mineral spirits or something. But I like the way it goes on. I like the way it soaks into the pieces. It does have an odor to it. So if you're sensitive to odors in your home or whatnot and you use this product, you're going to want to use it outside. Typically you want to offload it. I just kind of scrape it to offload it because I don't like wasting product on a piece of cardboard. See, I scrape it back off here. You can see where I get the residual off the brush because, like I said, I hate wasting product. And like most waxes, you don't want to saturate the piece. You just want to make sure that you're getting it covered. It's not necessary to get into every little nook, because when you buff it, it will work its way in there. One more turn. It's easy when it's a four-sided lamp, you know exactly where you're at. That cord out of the way. And once this wax cures, it will give it such a nice hard finish. So that's the light wax. I'm going to just add a hint of the dark wax. Again, you load up your brush and then you offload it, so you don't get big globs of wax. And I just kind of want to hit the low spots on this with the darker wax, just to create a little more shadow and age. And final side. And that's it for the wax. That's how easy that is. A little bit on this foot down here. Because I like dark feet. Anybody else have a furniture foot fetish? I love lion's paws. I love ball and claw feet. I love any of the old school decorative designs on old pieces of furniture. Victorian era typically is where those really came from. So now what I'm gonna do is I am going to grab my, wrong drawer again, wax buffer. It's just a waxing sponge. Rub this back a little bit. Again, with a piece that's got this much texture, it's difficult to get into all of the areas to get the wax buffed. But that's okay, because it's a lamp and it's not something people run their hands over frequently or touching a lot. I mean, they touch it up here a lot because they're turning it on, unless they've got it on a lamp switch, but that's it, guys. Yeah, I know I used a little chamois rag just so I could get into those parts that I wasn't able to get into. So I'm gonna let this cure. I'm gonna set it up. I'm going to come back and give you guys a final look, and we are done. We just finished this lamp from start to finish in about, I don't even know how long, 25 minutes? I don't know. Anyway, I'll be back in a few.